The morning I almost collapsed at my desk, I called my mother from the nurse's office. Blood pressure 158 over 102, 8 months pregnant. The doctor said I could die. My mother was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she asked if I was still getting paid that week. I'd been paying their mortgage for 9 years. $1,847 a month. They called it responsibility. They called it family. They called me the responsible one. I found out later they also called me by another name. If you've ever given everything to the people you considered family, but they never even considered you human, subscribe. And tell me where you're watching from. My name is Reese Crawford, and the morning my husband died, my mother asked me when I'd be back at work. Cole Perry was 33 years old. He was a structural engineer who could calculate the load-bearing capacity of a steel beam in his head, but couldn't remember to buy milk on the way home. He wore the same Timex watch every day, a $40 thing with a cracked face that he refused to replace because his grandfather had given it to him. He died on a Thursday in August when a scaffold collapsed at a construction site in Westerville. The foreman said he didn't suffer. I don't believe that, but I tell myself I do. The watch survived. The crystal was already cracked, but the impact stopped the hands at 2:47 p.m. I wear it every day now. People think it's sentimental. It is, but it's also a clock that tells the truth. It shows the exact moment my life split into before and after. Cole's funeral cost $12,800. I paid every cent. My mother brought a casserole. My brother Brandon didn't come. He said he couldn't get off work, which was interesting because Brandon hasn't held a job since he got fired from a Verizon store 2 years ago for showing up high. Nobody mentioned that. Nobody ever mentions Brandon's failures. They just mention mine. I was 3 months pregnant when Cole died. I found out 2 weeks before the scaffold fell. We'd been trying for a year. He cried when I showed him the test, not sad crying, the kind where your face just leaks, and you keep saying, really, over and over while holding a plastic stick. We were going to buy a house. We had $47,000 saved in a joint account. His last 4 paychecks were still in there when he died. My mother called me the night of the funeral, not to ask if I was okay, to ask if I'd thought about coming home for a while. She said it would be good for me. She said the house had plenty of room. She said they'd take care of me. What she meant was, the mortgage was due on Friday. I'd been paying my parents' mortgage since I was 22 years old, $1,847 a month. I was a senior auditor at Ridgeline Associates. I could calculate the total in my sleep. 108 payments, $199,476. I could have bought my own house twice over, but my mother had a way of turning a bill into a Bible verse. Family takes care of family, Reese. That's what we do. That's what God expects. So I moved back in, 5 months pregnant, freshly widowed, sleeping on the living room couch because my old bedroom had been converted into something else. But I'll get to that. The morning I almost collapsed was a Tuesday in January, 6:04 a.m., -4 degrees. I stood in the driveway scraping ice off the windshield of my 2011 Toyota Corolla with a credit card because I couldn't find the ice scraper. My belly pressed against the steering wheel when I drove now 8 months. The check engine light had been glowing orange since October. Cole would have fixed it in an afternoon. Cole fixed everything. The garage door was open. On one side, Brandon's BMW X3. White. Heated seats. Leased 7 months ago. I didn't know yet whose name was on that lease. On the other side, 3 cardboard boxes labeled Cole in my mother's handwriting. His Carhartt jacket. His steel-toe boots. His hard hat, still yellow, still scratched from the Sawmill Road project. Brandon had moved them out of my old bedroom in October to make room for his gaming setup. When I'd asked my mother about it, she'd touched my arm and said, "Honey, he's gone. Kyle needs the space." She called Brandon Kyle sometimes. His middle name. I don't know why that detail still cuts, but it does. I drove to work in the dark. The highway was salt white and empty. I passed the Dunkin' drive-thru on Morse Road, Cole, and I used to split a box of Joe on Saturday mornings while we looked at real estate listings on his phone. I kept driving. At my desk by 7. Spreadsheets. Coffee from the Keurig in the break room, French vanilla pod, the kind that smells better than it tastes. I was reviewing a client's depreciation schedule when the numbers started swimming. I blinked again. The fluorescent lights above me pulsed once, or maybe that was my vision. A pressure behind my eyes like someone was slowly inflating a balloon inside my skull. I stood up. My chair rolled back and hit the filing cabinet. I grabbed the edge of my desk with both hands. My fingers were tingling. The room tilted 15 degrees to the left, then corrected itself, then tilted again. Somebody called my name. I don't remember who. I remember the carpet gray commercial grade getting closer to my face. Then hands. Then the nurse's office, which smelled like Band-Aids and instant oatmeal. Blood pressure 158/102. The nurse looked at the reading, then at my belly, then at me. How far along are you? 8 months. And you're working full days? I didn't answer that. She called Dr. Priya Patel's office at Crestview Medical Center. They wanted me in that afternoon. I sat in the nurse's office, Cole's broken watch heavy on my wrist, and called my mother. She picked up on the third ring. I told her what happened, the dizziness, the blood pressure, the doctor's office. She was quiet for 3 seconds. I counted them on the dead watch. Then, but you're still getting paid this week, right? The mortgage is due Friday. I sat there, phone against my ear, hand on my belly, my dead husband's broken watch on my wrist, and I realized something I should have understood 9 years ago. I wasn't their daughter. I was their direct deposit. The doctor told my mother I could die. My mother asked if my short-term disability would still cover the mortgage. Dr. Priya Patel had the kind of face that didn't waste time on small talk. She sat across from me in the exam room at Crestview, her fingers laced over my chart, and said the words, severe preeclampsia, the way a mechanic says, transmission failure, clinical final, and expensive. Your blood pressure is 162/108. There's protein in your urine. You're presenting with headaches, visual disturbances, and edema that concerns me. She leaned forward. Reese, I need you to stop working. Full bed rest. If this progresses to eclampsia, you could have seizures. You could hemorrhage. You could lose the baby. Pause. You could die. I am not being dramatic. I'm being medical. She asked for my emergency contact. I gave her my mother's number. I sat in the room while Dr. Patel called. She put it on speaker hospital policy for high-risk patients. I heard the phone ring twice. My mother's church voice answered, warm, concerned, perfect pitch. Mrs. Crawford, this is Dr. Patel at Crestview Medical Center. I'm calling about your daughter Reese. She's been diagnosed with severe preeclampsia. This is a life-threatening condition. She needs to stop working immediately and remain on bed rest until delivery. Any additional physical or emotional stress could result in seizures, organ failure, or the loss of the baby. 3 seconds of silence. Doctor, with all due respect, I carried 2 children and worked until my water broke with both of them. Reese has always been a little sensitive. Dr. Patel's jaw tightened. Mrs. Crawford, this is not sensitivity. This is a medical emergency. Her blood pressure is dangerously high. I'll be documenting this conversation in her file. Well, we'll make sure she rests. Thank you, doctor. Click. My mother called me 14 minutes later, not to ask how I was feeling. So Dr. Patel says you need bed rest. Fine. You rest at home. But the mortgage is still due, Reese. Bills don't care about blood pressure. Can you file for short-term disability? What's the percentage? 60% of your salary. She'd already done the math. 60% of my salary still covered $1,847. I went home. Home, the word felt like a rock in my mouth. I lay on the couch in the living room, the ceiling fan clicking above me in a rhythm that matched my headache. From the other room I could hear Brandon playing Call of Duty, the gunfire muffled through the drywall. He'd been awake since noon. It was 4 p.m. That night, I opened my insurance portal on my phone. I needed to confirm my coverage for delivery. A C-section was looking more likely now, and those ran $15,000 to $25,000 before insurance. The portal loaded. I scrolled through recent claims. 6 claims I didn't authorize. Dental cleaning, August 12th. Vision exam, September 3rd. 3 prescriptions, Adderall, September through November. Dental filling, December 8th. All under my plan. All listing the patient as Brandon M. Crawford. My brother was using my insurance card. I scrolled further. My annual coverage was $8,000 for out-of-network. Brandon's claims had eaten $6,340 of it. If I needed an emergency C-section with complications, I might hit the wall. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was wrapping leftovers in foil pot roast. The house still smelled like it. Mom, Brandon is using my insurance. There are 6 claims on here I didn't approve. She didn't look up from the foil. Brandon doesn't have insurance, Reese. What was I supposed to do, let my son's teeth rot? You have coverage for a reason. The reason is my baby. And your baby will be fine. You're being dramatic again. There it was. Again. The word Dr. Patel had heard through the speaker. The word that sealed every door. 2 days later, my boss emailed me. Not about work. The subject line was, checking in personal. That wasn't like him. Peter Langford was a numbers man. He communicated in spreadsheets, not feelings. I called him. He was careful. Diplomatic. Reese, I just want to make sure everything's okay at home. Someone your mother actually, she called the office. She said you've been struggling since your husband passed. She mentioned some concerns about your... He paused. Stability. My mother had called my employer, told them I was unstable. While I was on bed rest with a life-threatening pregnancy, my mother was dismantling my career by phone. Peter, I'm fine. My mother is not a reliable source on my mental health. He accepted it. But the tone had shifted. I could hear it. A door had cracked, not closed, but cracked. That night, 11 p.m., I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. Through the wall, I could hear my mother on the phone in the kitchen. Her church voice, the warm one, the one that sounded like a Hallmark card. We're doing everything we can for Reese. She's been so lost since Cole died. Honestly, between you and me, Donna, I don't know if she can handle raising a baby alone. She can barely take care of herself. Thank God she has us. I pressed Cole's watch against my lips. The cracked crystal was cold. I didn't cry. I was past that now. Footsteps in the hallway. The fridge opened. Gerald Howard, my father. He stepped into the living room with a glass of water and saw me awake. Our eyes met. He stood there for 3 seconds. Your mother means well, kiddo. He walked back to the bedroom. I used to believe that. When I was 22 and fresh out of Ohio State, my father drove me to my first apartment. A studio on Hudson Street with a window that didn't lock right. He helped me carry the boxes up 3 flights, and in the car before he left he said, "Don't let your mother guilt you into paying our bills. You live your life, kiddo." I started paying their mortgage 2 months later, because I thought he was the one being forced. I thought I was protecting him from her. I thought we were on the same side. 12 years later, I was lying on his couch carrying a dead man's baby and he couldn't even open the door. The next morning, my mother announced the nursery reveal party. Saturday. 15 women from Grace Community Church coming to see the nursery she'd built in my old bedroom, the room where Cole's boots used to sit by the door. I want everyone to see how beautiful the room turned out. It's going to be so special for the baby. She was already planning the refreshments. Lemon squares, sweet tea, paper plates with little yellow ducks. 15 women from Grace Community Church were coming to admire the nursery my mother had built in the room where my husband's boots used to sit by the door. and I was supposed to smile and say thank you. 15 women told me I was lucky. One of them patted my belly and said, "God always provides." I snapped. The nursery was beautiful. I'll give my mother that. She'd painted the walls a soft sage green, hung white curtains with little embroidered leaves, and placed a brand new crib from Target against the far wall, the wall where Cole's drafting table used to sit. Where he'd spread out blueprints on Sunday mornings with a cup of coffee and a mechanical pencil behind his ear, sketching load calculations in the margins, while I read next to him on the bed. The bed was gone. The drafting table was gone. The blueprints were in a cardboard box in the garage between a broken lawnmower and a bag of road salt. In their place, a changing table, a diaper genie, and a framed print that said, "Dream Big Little One," in cursive script. 15 women filed in at 2 p.m., ages 45 to 70. Church dresses, potluck energy. They cooed at the crib. They touched the curtains. They smelled the lavender sachet my mother had hung from the closet door, a closet that still had Cole's winter coat in the back, because she hadn't found it yet. My mother stood in the center of the room like a docent at a museum. She'd curled her hair. She was wearing the blouse she saves for Easter and funerals. "We wanted to make sure this baby comes into a home full of love," she said, one hand over her heart. "Reese has been through so much, losing Cole, the pregnancy, the health scares. But that's what family does. We show up." A woman named Donna Kessler, Pastor Warren's wife, touched my arm. "You're so blessed, Reese. Not every girl has parents like this." Another woman, someone I didn't know, patted my belly without asking. "God always provides, honey. This baby is already so lucky." Lucky. I looked at the crib. Sitting on the spot where Cole used to draw buildings that would stand for 50 years. I looked at the dream big print covering the nail hole where he'd hung a framed photo of us at the Ohio State-Michigan game, both of us sunburned and stupid with happiness. I looked at my mother accepting a hug from a woman whose name I didn't know, performing gratitude she didn't feel for sacrifices she didn't make. And something inside me, the thing I'd been pressing down since August, since the funeral, since the mortgage, since the couch, since the 6 a.m. ice scraping cracked. Grateful. My voice came out wrong. Too loud for the room. Too raw for the pastel walls. 15 heads turned. "I've paid the mortgage on this house for 9 years. Every room you're standing in, I paid for it. $1,847 a month. For 9 years. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stop them. "That crib is sitting where my husband's desk used to be." She moved his things to the garage like they were leftover Christmas decorations, and I'm supposed to stand here and say thank you. Silence. The kind that has weight. My mother's face went white for exactly 2 seconds. I watched the blood leave and return. I watched the mask reassemble. She turned to the women, not to me, and her eyes filled with tears. Perfect tears. One per eye, precisely calibrated. "See what I mean?" Her voice trembled, a masterpiece of trembling. "The hormones. She's been like this since Cole passed. We are so worried about her." Donna Kessler put her arm around my mother. "Oh, Connie, you poor thing, you're doing your best." 3 other women nodded. 2 looked at the floor. Nobody looked at me. Not one woman in that room turned to me and said, "Is that true?" Not one asked to see a bank statement. They chose the version that came with lemon squares and sweet tea. They chose the woman who organized their potluck dinners. I stood in the nursery my mother built over my husband's memory, 8.5 months pregnant, and watched 15 women comfort the person who was destroying me. The guests left by 4. Paper plates in the trash. Lemon square crumbs on the counter. My mother moved through the kitchen with mechanical precision, wiping surfaces, folding dish towels, not looking at me. When the last car pulled out of the driveway, she stopped. She turned. She wasn't performing anymore. Her face was clean of warmth, the way a chalkboard is clean of writing, blank hard nothing behind it. You embarrassed me in front of my church family. Quiet voice, flat. In my house. I paid for this house, Mom. She smiled, the worst smile I've ever seen, thin, patient, almost pitying. Your name isn't on the deed, sweetheart. I didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. But something in the way she said it, the certainty, the rehearsed calm, told me it wasn't a figure of speech. She was telling me a fact I didn't have yet. By 6 p.m., the locks were changed. I know because I watched her do it, standing at the front door with a Phillips head screwdriver and a new quick-set deadbolt from Home Depot still in the plastic packaging. She didn't rush. She didn't yell. She just changed the lock the way you'd change a light bulb. Where am I supposed to go? You should have thought about that before you bit the hand that feeds you. I called my father. He picked up on the first ring. Come home tomorrow, Reese. Let things cool down. Your mother will come around. He didn't offer to open the door. He didn't offer to drive me somewhere. He didn't offer anything except tomorrow. -7 degrees. I sat in the Toyota in the Walmart parking lot off Bethel Road. Engine running, heat on, check engine light glowing orange against the snow. The lot was almost empty, just me, two semis idling near the garden center, and a man in a Carhartt jacket smoking by the cart return. Cole had that same jacket. His was in a box in the garage, if he could still reach it. My phone buzzed. Email. Visa ending 4471. Statement available. I didn't have a visa ending in 4471. I opened it. Balance $23,400. Purchases Best Buy $1,200. GameStop $340. Foot Locker $289. Monthly charges going back 7 months. All Columbus zip codes. All Brandon stores. My brother had opened a credit card in my name. I kept scrolling. Another notification: BMW Financial Services. Autopay confirmation. $780 per month. Linked to a social security number. My social security number. The white X3 in the heated garage. $34,800 in lease obligations on my credit. $23,400 plus $34,800. $58,200 of debt I didn't create, signed with a name I didn't authorize, paying for a life my brother was living in a house my mother controlled. I sat in that parking lot, engine rattling, and opened Instagram. Brandon had posted a story 3 hours ago. A photo of the nursery, the sage green walls, the Target crib, the dream big print. Caption: Getting ready for my nephew. Family first. 214 likes. Comments: Such a good uncle. Your family is beautiful. Blessed. He was standing in the room where my husband used to live, posting about family values from a phone I was probably paying for too. I put down the phone. I put my hand on my belly. Cole's watch ticked nothing on my wrist. 2:47. Always 2:47. Your dad would have burned that house down before he let them touch you. I whispered it to the dashboard, to the snow, to the baby who couldn't hear me yet but needed to. I'm not as brave as him, but I'm going to try. I started the engine. The check engine light glowed orange against the snow. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing: I was never paying for that house again. I woke up to someone knocking on my car window at 6 a.m. It was my boss's boss. She was holding 2 coffees, and she looked furious. Vivian Aldridge was 64 years old, a senior partner at Ridgeline Associates, and the kind of woman who wore reading glasses on a chain, not because she needed them there, but because it gave her something to point at people with during meetings. She'd spent 20 years at the IRS before going private: forensic audits, embezzlement cases, the kind of work where you followed money into holes that didn't want to be found. She drove a Subaru Outback with a League of Their Own bumper sticker and had never in 12 years at the firm asked anyone how their weekend was. She was standing in the Walmart parking lot on Bethel Road at 6 a.m., holding two large Dunkin' coffees and staring at me through the frosted glass like I was a spreadsheet that didn't balance. I opened the door. The cold hit me like a wall. "Reese." She said my name the way she said everything, like a verdict. "I stop here every morning for coffee. I've been parking in this lot for 9 years. I know every car that belongs here. Yours doesn't." She looked at my belly, then at the back seat where I'd wadded up my coat as a pillow. "Get in my car. Now." She didn't ask if I was okay. She could see I wasn't. Vivian's house was a brick two-story in Clintonville old neighborhood, big trees, the kind of street where people still wave from their porches. The kitchen smelled like actual coffee, not Keurig pods. She poured me a cup, set a plate of toast in front of me, and sat down across the table with her reading glasses on and her arms crossed. "Talk." I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I told her enough: the mortgage, the locks, the credit card, the BMW. I told her about the nursery party and the 15 women who hugged my mother. I told her about Dr. Patel and the blood pressure and the word dramatic that followed me from room to room like a stray dog. Vivian listened without moving. When I finished, the toast was cold and the coffee was half gone, and the house was so quiet I could hear the furnace click on in the basement. "Reese." She took off her reading glasses and set them on the table. "This isn't responsibility. This is theft. And I have spent 30 years putting people in prison for exactly this." She made 2 phone calls before 8 a.m. The first was to Dr. Patel, an appointment that afternoon, urgent walk-in priority. The second was to a man named Patrick Shaw. "Pat's an old friend from my IRS days," she said, writing his number on the back of a Ridgeline business card. "Criminal law, financial fraud. He doesn't sugarcoat and he doesn't lose. You'll like him." She handed me the card and looked at me over her glasses. "You're an auditor, Reese. One of the best I've trained. You've spent 10 years finding where other people's money went. Now it's time to find where yours went." I nodded. My throat was too tight to talk. "That afternoon, Dr. Patel put me on modified bed rest, not full, because she could see I wasn't in a position to lie still for 6 weeks, but reduced activity, daily blood pressure monitoring, and a follow-up every 5 days. She prescribed labetalol for the hypertension and looked me in the eye and said, 'The stress has to stop, Reese. I can medicate your blood pressure. I can't medicate your family.'" I moved into Vivian's guest room. It was small, a twin bed, a bookshelf full of old tax code manuals, and a window that looked out on a bird feeder shaped like a barn. It was the safest place I'd been in 5 months. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. No call of duty through the walls, no clicking of my mother's heels on hardwood, no silence where my father's voice should have been. Just the furnace and the wind and the occasional thump of snow sliding off the roof. I was sitting on the couch in the living room at 1 a.m. when the hallway light clicked on. Vivian came out in a flannel robe and wool socks, her hair flat on one side. She didn't say, "Can't sleep," or, "You okay?" She just sat down on the other end of the couch and pulled a blanket over her knees. We sat in the dark for a while. The bird feeder swayed outside the window. "I never had children," Vivian said. Not sad. Just factual, the way she said everything. "I used to think it was the biggest regret of my life. Spent 20 years thinking about it. 30. Wondering what I missed." She paused, adjusted the blanket. "But watching you, the way you fight for that baby, the way you kept going when anyone else would have stopped." She looked at me. "I think maybe I was just waiting to find the right daughter." I broke. Not loud, I don't do loud, but something in my chest that had been holding since August, since the scaffold, since the funeral, since the couch, and the mortgage, and the locks, and the parking lot, it let go. I cried the way you cry when someone says the thing you didn't know you needed to hear. The thing no one in your own family ever said. Vivian didn't hug me. She just reached over and held my wrist, the one with Cole's watch, and sat with me until I was done. The next morning, she handed me her laptop and a cup of Earl Grey. "You're an auditor, Reese. Time to audit your own family." She pointed her reading glasses at me. "Start with the deed." It took me 11 minutes to find what my father had spent 3 years hiding. I'm an auditor. It's what I do. Vivian's kitchen table became my war room. Laptop open, Earl Grey going cold. A yellow legal pad filling up with numbers that made my stomach turn. I started where every auditor starts: public records. Franklin County Recorder's Office. Online portal, property search. I typed the address I'd been mailing checks to for 9 years: 4847 Millbrook Lane, Columbus, Ohio, 43229. Current owner Brandon M. Crawford. Transfer date March 14th, 2022. Instrument quitclaim deed, signed by Howard R. Crawford. Notarized by a Patricia Fenn at a UPS store on Sawmill Road. I read it 3 times, then a fourth. The letters didn't rearrange themselves. My father had signed the house over to my brother 3 years ago, quietly, at a UPS store, while I was still writing a check every month for $1,847 money that was now flowing into a property owned by a 27-year-old who hadn't paid a utility bill in his life. Brandon owned the house. I paid for the house. And nobody told me because nobody thought I'd check. They forgot what I do for a living. I pulled the title history. The original mortgage was a 30-year fix taken out in 2001, my parents' names. Refinanced in 2015, same names. Then the quitclaim in 2022, Howard to Brandon, no consideration listed. Meaning Brandon didn't pay a cent. My father just gave it to him, like handing over car keys. Except the car was worth $280,000, and I'd been filling the tank for a decade. But there was another line on the title: a lien, HELOC home equity line of credit, $120,000, opened April 2022, 1 month after the deed transfer. Cosigner Reese E. Crawford, my social security number. My signature, except it wasn't. I'd never signed anything for a HELOC. I'd never been asked. Someone had used my information to co-sign a $120,000 loan against a house I didn't own. I traced the disbursements. The $120,000 didn't go to home improvements. It didn't go to medical bills. It went to an online checking account at a bank I didn't recognize, a digital-only bank, the kind with no branches and a neon green logo. From there, the money moved in chunks: $2,000 here, $5,000 there, $8,500 on a single Tuesday in November. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM. My father was a gambler. $120,000 in 18 months, fed into sports betting platforms through an account he'd opened under a name that was technically his, Howard R. Crawford, but secured with a signature that was technically mine. I sat back in Vivian's kitchen chair. The bird feeder outside the window swung in the wind. A cardinal sat on the ledge, red against the gray sky, not caring about anything. Then I found the last piece. Joint savings account Chase, ending in 7714. The account Cole and I had opened together when we started house hunting. The one with $47,000 in it. Cole's last 4 paychecks were in there. His overtime from the Sawmill Road project. The money we were going to use for a down payment on a 3-bedroom in Westerville with a yard big enough for a swing set. Transfer September 2nd. 3 weeks after Cole's funeral. $47,000 moved to Howard Crawford's digital checking account, the same account that fed DraftKings. My father had taken the money my dead husband left for our baby and lost it on football games. While I was sleeping on the couch in his house. While I was scraping ice off my car at 6 a.m. to go earn the mortgage. While he stood in the hallway and said, "Your mother means well, kiddo." I closed the laptop. I put both hands flat on the table. I breathed until the room stopped tilting. Then I opened a new document and started a spreadsheet. Because that's what I do. I don't scream. I don't throw things. I build columns. Mortgage paid $199,476. HELOC co-signed without authorization $120,000. Savings stolen $47,000. Credit card fraud. Brandon $23,400. BMW lease fraud. Brandon $34,800. Insurance claims Brandon $6,340. Total exposure $431,016. I printed it. I put it in a manila folder. I labeled it Crawford in black Sharpie. Then I drove to Patrick Shaw's office. Patrick Shaw worked out of a converted row house on Oak Street with a paralegal named Dina, who answered the phone like she was doing you a favor. He was 52, ex-prosecutor, built like a high school football coach, who'd found a second career in making people uncomfortable in depositions. He read my file for 8 minutes without speaking. Then he closed it. Miss Crawford, your brother committed identity theft. That's a 4th-degree felony in Ohio. Your father committed HELOC fraud using your social security number. That's also a felony. The unauthorized insurance use adds another layer. He tapped the folder. I can file the criminal referral for Brandon this week. Your father will need the bank records subpoenaed to prove the gambling trail, but what you've pulled is more than enough for probable cause. What about the house? Civil lawsuit. Unjust enrichment. You've paid $199,476 into a property you have zero ownership of. We file, they settle, or they sell. Either way, you get paid. And my mother, Patrick paused. Your mother didn't sign anything illegal that I can see, but she built the system that made all of this possible. The civil suit will name her as a co-defendant. And when this goes public, he leaned back. Her reputation will take the hit she's earned. I met Piper at a Panera on Henderson Road. She was 26, a waitress at a Chili's on Polaris, and she looked like someone who'd been tired for a very long time. She'd dated Brandon for 11 months before he dumped her for not having family money, which was ironic in ways she didn't fully understand yet. She stirred her iced tea and told me everything. He used to brag about it, she said. Like it was funny. My sister pays for everything. That house is going to be mine someday. He'd say it at parties, in front of his friends. He had a nickname for you. What nickname? She looked at her tea. The ATM. That's what he and your mom called you when you weren't around. The ATM is covering it. Don't worry, the ATM gets paid Friday. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I took out a pen and wrote it down on the legal pad. The ATM. 2 words, 3 letters, 9 years of my life. Piper signed a written statement before her shift started. I bought her lunch. She didn't ask for anything else. I drove back to Vivian's house, parked in the driveway, sat in the car for a minute, engine off, Cole's watch on my wrist. I had the deed. I had the debt. I had the HELOC. I had Piper's statement. I had Patrick on retainer. But I didn't have the one thing that would make 120 people at Grace Community Church listen to a pregnant widow over the woman who'd organized their potluck dinners for 15 years. I needed someone who'd survived Connie Crawford before me. My mother showed up at Vivian's door with a casserole and a smile. She didn't come to apologize. She came to perform. Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. I was at the kitchen table reviewing Patrick's draft complaint when the doorbell rang. Vivian answered. I heard the voice before I saw the face, that warm, honeyed pitch my mother reserved for strangers, pastors, and anyone she needed something from. Hi, you must be Margaret. Oh, I'm sorry, Vivian. I'm Connie Reese's mother. I heard she's been staying with a friend from work, and I just wanted to bring her something warm. She held up a foil-wrapped dish. Chicken and rice casserole, her favorite since she was little. It wasn't my favorite. I don't even like rice. But my mother had never let facts interfere with a good performance. Vivian let her in. Later, she told me she wanted to see the act-up-close professional curiosity, she called it. 20 years at the IRS, you develop a taste for watching people lie in real time. My mother stepped into the kitchen and saw me. Her face did something complicated. Surprise, then softness. Then a flicker of calculation so fast you'd miss it if you weren't trained to look. I was trained to look. She didn't address me first. She addressed Vivian. Thank you so much for watching out for my daughter. She's been through so much since her husband passed. She set the casserole on the counter and dabbed her eye with one dry knuckle, I noticed. No tear. Honestly, between you and me, I'm worried about her mental state. She's been saying some very hurtful things, accusing her own family of stealing from her. It breaks my heart. We've tried to get her help, but she keeps pushing us away. She turned to me, warm eyes, soft voice. Honey, I just want you to come home. We can work through this. You need family right now, real family. Not. She glanced around Vivian's kitchen, the tax manuals on the shelf, the bird feeder outside the reading glasses on the counter, and let the silence finish her sentence. Vivian stood by the sink, arms crossed, reading glasses hanging from the chain around her neck. She watched my mother the way she watched defendants at depositions, still patient, cataloging every micro-expression for later use. 5 seconds of silence. Connie. Vivian's voice was flat as a ledger. I spent 30 years at the IRS catching people who lie for a living. Fortune 500 CEOs, hedge fund managers, men who hid millions in offshore accounts and wept on the witness stand. She uncrossed her arms and picked up her reading glasses, pointed them at my mother. You're good, but you're not that good. Leave my house. The mask cracked. Not slowly, all at once, like a plate hitting tile. My mother's face went from warm to nothing in under a second. Her eyes slid past Vivian and locked onto mine. Cold. The eyes I'd seen after the nursery party, the eyes behind the performance. You'll regret this. Both of you. Quiet, precise. That baby needs real family, not some stranger playing house. Vivian didn't blink. Funny. That's exactly what Reese said about you. My mother left. She didn't take the casserole. Vivian looked at it for a long moment, then picked it up and dropped it in the trash. I'm not eating that. That night, 9 p.m. My phone rang. Dad. He was crying. Not the quiet kind, the messy, gulping kind that sounded rehearsed even through the distortion of the speaker. Your mother hasn't eaten since you left Reese. She sat in the nursery for an hour and just cried. Her blood pressure is through the roof. She's talking about going to the emergency room. Pause. Sniff. If something happens to her, that's on you. Come home, please. For me, kiddo. Kiddo. The word he used when he wanted me soft. The word from the car outside my first apartment. The word that used to mean love and now meant leverage. I almost broke. I'll admit that. My finger hovered over the words I'd been trained my whole life to say, I'm sorry, Dad. I'll come home. I'll fix it. The muscle memory of being the responsible one, the fixer, the ATM. I hung up instead. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, harder than the parking lot, harder than the nursery. 2 days later, Thursday, 3 p.m. A knock on Vivian's front door. Not my mother this time. A woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard and a state ID badge. I'm looking for Reese Crawford. I'm with Franklin County Children's Services. We received a concern about a pregnant woman living in potentially unsuitable conditions at this address. Anonymous tip. No name given. But we both knew. The investigator was professional. Thorough. She checked the guest room, asked about prenatal care, reviewed my records from Dr. Patel. Vivian produced her business card, her mortgage statement, her property tax records. The investigator looked around the clean brick house with the bird feeder and the tax manuals, and the Earl Grey on the counter, and I could see her doing the math. She closed the case in 26 minutes, wrote unfounded on her form, apologized for the inconvenience. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and shook, not from cold. From the knowledge that my mother had called Child Protective Services on her own pregnant daughter. She had weaponized the state against my baby because I'd stopped paying her mortgage. Vivian sat down across from me. She was quiet for a long time. Then, Reese, I need to tell you something. She folded her hands on the table. Remember the night I told you I knew a woman like your mother? I nodded. Her name is Pearl Dixon. She's your mother's older sister. My mother doesn't have a sister. She does. Pearl was part of Grace Community Church before your mother joined. In 1998, your mother took $40,000 of Pearl's savings, told her it was for a family emergency. When Pearl asked for it back, Connie told the entire congregation that Pearl was mentally ill, paranoid, delusional. Vivian paused. Pearl lost her friends, her church, her community. She moved to Dayton. She hasn't spoken to your mother in 25 years. The room was very still. The furnace clicked. The bird feeder swung. How do you know this? Because Pearl is in my women's Bible study group at First Presbyterian in Dayton. She drives 40 minutes every Wednesday. She sat in this kitchen. And when I told her about you, Vivian's voice changed the first time I'd heard it soften past professional. She cried. She said, "It's happening again. It's happening again. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even the second, because if my mother did it to Pearl and then to me, she'd do it to anyone." This wasn't a mother having a hard time. This wasn't grief or stress or bad communication. This was who Connie Crawford was. A pattern. A system. 25 years of the same play, different daughters. Pearl wants to meet you, Vivian said. She's been waiting 25 years for someone in the family to finally see your mother clearly. I told Vivian to give her my number. Then I opened my laptop and searched for one thing: the date of the annual community dinner at Grace Community Church. Saturday, 8 days away. My mother was giving the opening remarks. Lorraine Pearl. Pearl Hadley, known Pearl Dixon, looked nothing like my mother. She looked like what my mother could have been if she'd ever learned to love someone without charging them for it. She arrived at Vivian's house on a Wednesday evening driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a Dayton Public Library sticker on the bumper. She was 63, with silver hair cut short, and hands that looked like they'd spent decades doing real work, not the manicured performance hands my mother maintained for church. She wore a fleece pullover and no jewelry. She carried a tote bag from Trader Joe's. She saw my belly first, then my face, then Cole's watch on my wrist. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She sat down at Vivian's kitchen table, accepted a cup of coffee, and looked at me for a long time. "You have her eyes," she said, "but not her mouth. Thank God." I didn't know what to say to an aunt I'd been told didn't exist, so I asked the only question that mattered. What happened in 1998? Pearl told it simply. No performance, no dramatic pauses, just facts the way I would have told it. I realized sitting there that I'd gotten my auditor's brain from her side of the family, not my mother's. Pearl was 37. Connie was 33. Pearl had saved $40,000 over 6 years working as an office manager at a dental practice in Columbus. Connie called in March, family emergency. Their mother was sick. Needed a procedure. Insurance wouldn't cover it. Pearl wired the money that week. Their mother wasn't sick. There was no procedure. Connie used the money for a down payment on the Millbrook Lane house. When Pearl found out and asked for the money back, Connie didn't argue, didn't negotiate. She went to the pastor, the old pastor before Dean Warren, and told him Pearl was having episodes. Paranoid. Making accusations. Possibly dangerous. She cried in his office, Pearl said, wrapping both hands around her coffee mug. The same way she probably cried at your nursery party. One tear per eye. Just the right amount. Pearl lost her Bible study group first. Then her friends stopped returning calls. Then someone left a pamphlet about mental health resources in her mailbox, no return address. By June, she was eating lunch alone every Sunday. By August, she'd moved to Dayton. 25 years, Pearl said. I lost my church, my friends, my community, because I asked for my own money back. She looked at me. And your mother told you she was an only child. Her whole life. Of course she did. Dead sisters don't ask questions. We sat with that for a while. Vivian refilled the coffee. The bird feeder swung outside. Pearl, I need to ask you something. I leaned forward. The annual community dinner at Grace Community is Saturday. My mother is giving the opening remarks. She'll be on stage in front of 120 people talking about family values. I paused. I'm going to tell them the truth. All of it. Everything she did to me, and everything she did to you. Pearl set down her mug. You want me there. I need you there. Because if it's just me, the hormonal pregnant daughter who got kicked out, she'll spin it. She'll cry. She'll win. But if you stand up and say, she did this to me 25 years ago, I let the math speak for itself. Pearl was quiet for a long time. She looked at Vivian, then at my belly, then at the watch on my wrist. What time does it start? Thursday morning. Patrick Shaw's office on Oak Street. Dina the paralegal buzzed me in without smiling, which I'd come to understand was her version of warmth. Patrick had the criminal referral ready. Identity theft 4th-degree felony. Credit card fraud. Unauthorized use of personal identifying information, all filed against Brandon Michael Crawford. The deputy will serve him Saturday, Patrick said. I coordinated with Franklin County Sheriff's Office. They'll have someone at the church. At the church. You said he'd be there, sitting with your mother, in front of 120 witnesses. Patrick leaned back. I've been doing this for 20 years, Reese. Trust me, the location matters. Not for the law. For the story people tell afterward. I called Pastor Dean Warren that afternoon. He agreed to meet me at the church office at 4 p.m. His office smelled like old hymnals and lemon pledge. He was 57, balding with the careful eyes of a man who'd spent 18 years listening to people explain why their version of events was the right one. He'd known my mother for 12 of those years. She ran his hospitality committee. She organized every potluck, every fundraiser, every community dinner. She was by all public accounts the backbone of Grace Community Church. I told him everything. I brought the deed records, the credit report, the HELOC documents, Piper's written statement, Pearl's story. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. His fingers were laced on the desk the way Dr. Patel's had been the posture of someone processing information they didn't want to have. Your mother told me last week that you were having a breakdown, he said. She asked me to pray for you. She said she was terrified you might hurt yourself. Pastor Warren, I'm an auditor. I don't have breakdowns. I have spreadsheets. He almost smiled. Almost. The annual community dinner is Saturday. Your mother is giving the opening remarks. He paused. She asked me if she could say a few words about family. He looked at the documents on his desk, then at me. I think you should say a few words too. Friday night, Vivian's kitchen, 11 p.m. The house was dark except for the light above the stove. I sat at the table with my folder. Not to read, I knew every number by heart. I'd been an auditor for 10 years. I didn't need notes. I needed nerve. My phone buzzed. Patrick Deputy confirmed for Saturday. Service papers ready. He'll be inside by 11:45. Another buzz. Pearl, I'll be in the back row. I'll stand when you need me. I looked at Cole's watch. 2:47. It would always be 2:47. One more night, E, I whispered. Then I'm done being the ATM. Saturday morning, I put on the only nice dress that still fit over my belly, a navy blue thing from Target that Cole said made me look like a senator. Vivian drove. Pearl was already there, sitting in the last pew, invisible. 120 people filed into the fellowship hall at Grace Community Church for the annual community dinner. My mother stood at the podium, smiling, adjusting the microphone. She had no idea I was in the building. My mother told 120 people that family comes first. Then I told them what that cost me down to the last cent. The fellowship hall at Grace Community smelled like green bean casserole and lemon pine sol. Long tables covered in white paper tablecloths, crock pots plugged into power strips, sweet tea in plastic pitchers, deviled eggs on paper plates, with little American flag toothpicks left over from the 4th of July. This was my mother's kingdom, every napkin folded, every name tag written in her looping cursive, every detail controlled, because control was the only language she spoke fluently. I sat in the third row from the back between Vivian and an elderly man who smelled like Old Spice and kept offering me butterscotch candies from his pocket. Pearl was in the last pew near the exit, wearing the same fleece pullover she'd worn to Vivian's kitchen. She looked calm. I was not calm. I was doing math in my head to keep my hands from shaking 1,847 times. 108 is $199,476. $199,476 plus $120,000 is $319,476. Plus $47,000 is $366,476. Plus $58,200 is $424,676. Plus $6,340 is $431,016. $431,016. I could recite it forward and backward and in my sleep. That was the number. That was what being a good daughter cost. My mother took the podium at 12:15. She'd had her hair done, new blouse cream silk pearl buttons. She gripped the edges of the podium the way she gripped everything, with the confidence of a woman who had never been told no by anyone she couldn't outlast. Thank you all for being here today. Grace Community isn't just a church, it's a family. She smiled. The room smiled back. 120 people who believed her because she brought casseroles when their husbands died and organized prayer chains when their kids got sick, and always showed up with exactly the right amount of concern at exactly the right time. Family isn't perfect, she continued. Family is sacrifice. It's showing up when it's hard. It's doing the thankless work because that's what love looks like. She paused, the practiced pause, the one that lets the silence do the preaching. And I want to take a moment to recognize someone who embodies that. She looked at me. Found me in the third row. Her eyes softened or performed softening, which after 31 years I could finally tell apart. My daughter Reese has been through the hardest year of her life. She lost her husband. She's carrying a baby on her own. But she has us. She'll always have us. She opened her arms. Reese, honey, come up here. 120 people turned. Some smiled. Donna Kessler, the pastor's wife, put her hand over her heart. My mother stood at the podium with her arms open, waiting for me to walk into them, the final scene of the play she'd been directing since August. Grieving mother welcomes lost daughter home. Curtain falls. Applause. I stood up. Slowly, the belly made everything slow now. Vivian touched my wrist as I passed. Not to stop me. Just to say I'm here. I walked up the center aisle. I could feel Pearl's eyes on my back from the last row. I could feel the deputy near the side door. I didn't look, but I knew he was there because Patrick Shaw was thorough the way I was thorough. Details, preparation, columns that add up. I reached the podium. My mother hugged me. I let her. She smelled like Estee Lauder and hairspray, and the specific warmth of a woman who believes she's already won. Then I stepped to the microphone. Thank you, Mom. Silence. A few people nodded. You're right. I am responsible. My mother smiled. She didn't understand yet. I've been responsible for the mortgage on your house for 9 years. I kept my voice level. Auditor voice. The voice I used when presenting findings to a client who didn't want to hear them. $1,847 a month. 108 payments. That's $199,476. The room shifted. Not a sound, a feeling. Like the barometric pressure had dropped before a storm. My mother's smile held, but the muscles underneath it went rigid. I was also responsible enough to check who actually owns the house I've been paying for. I looked at her. Right at her. It's Brandon. Dad signed the quitclaim deed on March 14th, 2022. Filing number 2022-0347U821. Franklin County Recorder's Office. I have it memorized. Pause. I'm an auditor. It's what I do. My mother's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I turned to the room. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was reading a report, the most important audit of my life. My brother Brandon opened a credit card in my name. $23,400. He also leased a BMW using my social security number. $34,800. I didn't authorize either. The police report was filed last Tuesday. Brandon was at table 3. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I heard the chair scrape against the floor, the sound of a man trying to stand without drawing attention. Then another sound. Mr. Crawford, please remain seated. The deputy. Quiet. Professional. Brandon sat back down. My father used my social security number to co-sign a $120,000 home equity loan. The money went to DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMGM. Online gambling. $120,000 in 18 months. My mother turned to my father. Across the room, at table 5, Howard Crawford sat with his hands flat on the white paper tablecloth. He didn't look up. My mother's face, I watched it happen in real time, went from shock to calculation to something I'd never seen before. She didn't know. The gambling was news to her. Her husband had been lying to her the same way she'd been lying to me. And 3 weeks after my husband Cole died, my voice almost broke on his name. Almost. I held it. While I was sleeping on the couch in the house I paid for, my father transferred our savings account. $47,000. The money Cole and I saved for our first home. His last 4 paychecks. Dad moved it to his gambling account on September 2nd. The room was so quiet I could hear the crock-pot on table 6 bubbling. Someone's phone buzzed and they silenced it instantly, like even the phone knew to shut up. But I'm not the first. From the back of the room, the last row, a chair pushed back against the linoleum with a sound like a question mark. Pearl Dixon stood up, 63 years old, silver hair, fleece pullover, no makeup, no performance. A few of the older members turned and I saw it on their faces. Recognition, confusion. A woman they hadn't seen in a quarter century standing in the church she'd been erased from. My name is Pearl Dixon. I'm Connie's older sister. A murmur. My mother went white. In 1998, my sister took $40,000 of my savings. She told me it was for a family emergency. When I asked for it back, she went to the pastor and told him I was mentally ill. I lost my church. I lost my friends. I lost 25 years. Pearl's voice didn't shake. I moved to Dayton. I haven't spoken to my sister since, until Reese called me last week. She sat back down. The room was still. My mother gripped the podium, her fingernails manicured French tips pressed into the wood. She looked out at the room. She was looking for allies, for Donna Kessler, For anyone. Donna Kessler was looking at her plate. Everything I did was for this family. My mother's voice came out cracked, not the beautiful crack she used for performances. A real one. Ugly. Wet. I leaned into the microphone. I didn't raise my voice. I lowered it. Ethan was my family. I caught myself. Cole. Cole was my family. The slip didn't matter. The room heard the correction. They heard the name of a dead man spoken by his pregnant wife. And you couldn't even let me keep his boots. Nobody clapped. Nobody gasped. The silence was heavier than that, the kind of silence that happens when 120 people realize simultaneously that the woman who made their casseroles also made her own daughter sleep in a car at 8.5 months pregnant in January. The deputy stepped forward. Brandon Crawford. Brandon didn't move. The deputy placed the papers on the table in front of him. Service complete. Brandon stared at the documents like they were written in a language he didn't speak. My mother called my name. Reese. Quiet. Reese, please. Quieter. Reese. Barely a whisper. I placed the microphone on the podium, walked down the aisle. Vivian was at the door holding my coat. She didn't say a word. She just handed it to me and walked me to the car. Behind us, through the closing door, I heard my mother's voice. One final time, cracked, stripped, reaching for a daughter who was already gone. Kyle Brandon. Brandon called me from Franklin County Jail 3 days later. He didn't ask how I was. He asked me to post his bail. Bryn Reese, come on. This is insane. His voice through the jail phone had that tinny, compressed quality that strips away everything except the words themselves. No charm, no performance. Just a 27-year-old man in a county jumpsuit who still couldn't pronounce the word consequences. I'm your brother. Just post the bail and we'll figure this out. Mom is losing her mind. Dad won't even answer the phone. I'm sitting in here with guys who these are actual criminals. So are you, Brandon? 4th-degree felony, identity theft. It was a credit card. People share credit cards all the time. People don't forge applications using their sister's social security number. And they don't lease BMWs in someone else's name. Those are actual crimes committed by an actual criminal, which is why you're sitting where you're sitting. Silence. 4 seconds. I counted on Cole's watch out of habit even though it couldn't count anymore. You're going to regret this. His voice dropped low. The same low my mother used when the audience left the room. I've been regretting things for 9 years, Brandon. I'm done. I hung up. Bail was set at $50,000. Nobody posted it. My mother tried. She called every bondsman in Franklin County, but her accounts were frozen pending the civil suit. Brandon sat in jail for 11 days before his public defender negotiated a reduced bond. By then, the BMW had been repossessed from the driveway on Millbrook Lane. The repo driver said Brandon's gaming chair was visible through the front window. Still warm, probably. The dominoes fell in a specific order. I know because I track them the way I track everything in a spreadsheet. Domino 1, Brandon's charges. Identity theft, 4th-degree felony. Credit card fraud. Unauthorized use of personal identifying information. The prosecutor added a count for the BMW lease, a separate forgery charge. Patrick Shaw said the case was a prosecutor's layup. Brandon's public defender advised a plea. Brandon refused. He went to trial in April and lost in 3 hours. Sentencing 18 months. Restitution $58,200. 3 years probation after release. Domino 2 Howard. My father hired his own lawyer, a man named Dennis something strip mall office on Morse Road. Dennis took one look at the HELOC documents and the gambling records and told Howard the same thing Patrick told me: felony. Using a family member's social security number to secure a loan without their knowledge or consent. Federal territory if the bank pushed it. Howard didn't push back. He didn't fight. He did what he'd done his entire life. He looked for the path of least resistance. Patrick called me on a Tuesday. Your father wants a plea deal. He's offering to testify against Brandon, confirm the deed, transfer was premeditated, confirm Brandon knew about the credit card fraud. In exchange, he pleads to a misdemeanor for the HELOC, probation, restitution. He wants to testify against his own son. He wants to save himself Reese. That's all he's ever wanted. Howard took the stand at Brandon's trial. He sat in the witness chair in a suit I'd never seen before, probably bought for the occasion, probably on a credit card, and confirmed everything. Yes, he signed the quitclaim deed. Yes, Brandon knew about the credit card. Yes, the deed transfer was discussed at the kitchen table while Reese was at work. Brandon stared at his father from the defense table. You're testifying against your own son. Howard looked at his hands. He didn't answer. The court reporter's fingers kept moving. The judge didn't ask him to respond. Nobody did. Howard Crawford's silence was already on the record. It had been on the record for 31 years. Domino 3 the house. The civil suit moved fast. Unjust enrichment. 9 years of mortgage payments into a property Reese Crawford had no ownership stake in. Patrick's filing was 11 pages. The judge's order was 2. Sell the house, divide proceeds, apply Reese Crawford's documented payments as priority lien. 4847 Millbrook Lane went on the market in May. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, attached garage. The listing photos showed the sage green nursery, the dream big little one print still on the wall. It sold in 6 weeks for $285,000. After the mortgage balance, legal fees, and restitution allocation, a check for $174,218 was issued to Reese E. Crawford. It wasn't $431,016. It wasn't everything. But it was the house I'd carried on my back for 9 years, finally converted into something that belonged to me on paper. Domino 4, Connie. My mother was not charged with anything. Patrick was right, she hadn't signed any fraudulent documents. Her name wasn't on the HELOC. She hadn't opened the credit cards. She hadn't placed the bets. But the law is a narrow instrument, and my mother's crimes were wide. She lost the house. She lost her son to a prison sentence. She lost her husband to a gambling addiction she didn't know he had, and to the public humiliation of discovering it in front of every person she'd spent 12 years performing for. She lost the hospitality committee. Pastor Warren met with her privately the week after the dinner and suggested she step back from leadership. She lost the women who used to call her for prayer requests. They stopped calling. She lost the next-door reputation, the Facebook sympathy, the church directory listing that used to read, Connie Crawford, Hospitality Chair. She lost everything she'd built her identity on, not because of the law, because of the truth. She called me 9 times in the first 2 weeks. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages followed a pattern. I could have predicted anger first. You destroyed this family, Reese. Then bargaining. Let's just sit down and talk like adults. Then guilt. I'm your mother, doesn't that mean anything? Then silence. She called Vivian once. Vivian picked up. Please, Vivian, please let me talk to my daughter. Vivian's voice was calm and final. She's not your daughter anymore, Connie. She's mine. 3 months later, I held my daughter for the first time. She weighed 6 pounds and 4 ounces. She had Cole's chin and my stubbornness and a grip strength that surprised the nurse. I named her Rosemary Joan Perry. Rosemary for Cole's grandmother, Joan for Vivian Perry, for the man who didn't live long enough to hold her, but left her everything that mattered. We called her Rosie. The apartment was small, 800 square feet. 1 bedroom. No garage. No guest room. No one else's name on the lease. It was the most space I'd ever had. I found it in June, a second-floor unit on Neal Avenue, 10 minutes from Vivian's house, with a window in the bedroom that faced east. Rosie's crib fit between my bed and that window. Every morning, the sun came through and landed on her face, and she'd squint and kick her feet like she was annoyed by the audacity of daylight. Cole would have loved that. He was the same way. I put his watch on the nightstand next to her crib. The cracked Timex with the hands frozen at 2:47. Sometimes at night when she cried and I picked her up and walked the apartment in the dark, I'd pass the nightstand and touch the crystal with my fingertip. Still warm from the lamp. Still broken. Still telling the only time that mattered. We made it, I said one night, Rosie asleep against my shoulder. Her breath warm and impossibly small against my neck. She's here. We made it. Vivian came every Sunday. She'd hold Rosie in one arm and a cup of Earl Grey in the other and read aloud from whatever she was reading that week. Tax law journals mostly, which Rosie seemed to enjoy based on the frequency of her drooling. Vivian bought her a onesie that said future auditor in block letters. I told her that was child abuse. She said it was aspirational. She needs a grandmother. I said one afternoon watching Vivian burp Rosie with a competence that surprised us both. A real one. Vivian looked at me. Her eyes were wet, which I'd only seen once before the night on the couch. I think she already has too, she said. Pearl drove in from Dayton every other weekend. She'd bring a casserole, a real one, the kind you make because you want to feed someone, not because you want witnesses. She'd sit on my apartment floor with Rosie on a blanket between us and tell me stories about my mother as a little girl, stories I'd never heard because I'd been told Pearl didn't exist. She was sweet once, Pearl said watching Rosie grab at a plastic rattle, before she figured out that sweet wasn't as useful as smart. One Saturday, Pearl held Rosie up to the window. The sun caught Rosie's face, and she squinted Cole's squint, and Pearl laughed. She's got your stubbornness, Reese, and her daddy's chin, and absolutely none of your mother's talent for lying. She kissed Rosie's forehead. Thank God. 3 women. 3 generations of not being related. The most honest family I'd ever had. In August, a letter arrived. No return address. Handwriting, I recognized the careful slanted print my father used on birthday cards and hardware store lists. I held the envelope over the kitchen counter for a long time. It was light. 1 page, maybe less. I didn't open it. It sat on the counter for 3 weeks next to the coffee maker and a banana that came and went twice. I looked at it every morning. Some days I almost reached for it. Some days I turned the envelope face down so I wouldn't have to see his handwriting. Vivian asked me once if I was going to open it. I said I didn't know. She nodded and didn't ask again. Pearl never asked at all. She understood better than anyone that some doors stay closed, not because you're afraid of what's behind them, but because you've finally learned that not every door is yours to open. My mother called responsibility what most people would call robbery. My father called silence what most people would call betrayal. And my brother called entitlement what most people would call a crime. I used to think being the responsible one meant I was loved. I wasn't loved. I was useful. There's a difference. And it took losing my husband sleeping in a car and almost losing my daughter to finally learn it. The people who say family is everything usually mean your sacrifice is everything. Howard's letter is still on my counter. One sentence visible through the envelope when I hold it to the light. I checked once late at night when Rosie was sleeping and the apartment was quiet, and my curiosity got the better of my boundaries. 5 words. I should have said something. He's right. He should have. But the thing about silence is, once you've let it last 9 years, 5 words don't fill the hole. They just echo in it. I haven't opened it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But I'll tell you this. Whatever's inside that envelope, it weighs less than my daughter. It weighs less than Vivian's Earl Grey on Sunday mornings. It weighs less than Pearl's casserole on the apartment floor. It weighs less than a broken watch on a nightstand that still tells me the only time that matters. It weighs less than everything I built after they tried to take it all. Would you open it?